Hello everyone, this is Velveteen and welcome to the third episode of Nikke Lore, where we talk about everything Nikke Lore related. As always, I need to remind everyone that there will be spoilers up to chapter 26 in the campaign. Why? Because I'm still stuck in 27. Now for today's episode, The Conspiracy of the Ark. Now that's an ominous title and we'll get into why in a bit. This video will talk about the history of the Ark, the places of the Ark, the factions inside the Ark, the deep dark secrets of the Ark, and maybe by the end of the video you have your own theories about the Ark too. The timeline of the Ark is sketchy at best. We do know that it was created after the first Rapture War, and humans didn't move in until very recently. In about 4 years since the first Rapture invasion, humanity lost, and then they decided to flee into the Ark, which means that it was built in less than 4 years? But if we listen to some conspiracy theorists, people were also skeptical of how fast the Ark is constructed, and for good reason. Chances are these enterprises knew about the existence of Rapture for decades. Was the Ark created before or after the Rapture War? We'll get into that. But for time periods that we certain of, the time period between the order to flee the Ark and the events of Overzone where the doors of the Ark close is unknown, but we learned that Red Hood wakes up 30 years later and meets Rappy for the first time, which means the time between closing the doors and ordering to flee is less than 30 years. However, we do have a better timeline where Johan was part of the second Rapture Reclamation event, which took place 60 years ago. If we assume that as soon as humans settle into the Ark, they decided to strike back at the Raptures, then the Ark should be around the same age as well. Which makes sense because many of the older population inside the Ark can still remember the sky and life on the surface. We can assume the average citizens do not have access to high-tech life support. That means most young adults and children that first enter the Ark should remember the surface. If we see the event of Overzone where Oswald mentions, once the door of the Ark closes, it will never open again, meaning no new humans will enter the Ark from this point forward. So the people who remembered were part of the initial people who won the Ark lottery. So yes, the Ark cannot be that old. But what exactly is this Ark? It's a gigantic underground city that houses the remnants of humanity. The exact number of citizens is unknown, but it should be pretty high if Nikkes are able to be mass produced in assembly lines, each Nikke requiring a human female aged 10 to 25 to be created. The city is covered by a giant dome, creating an artificial sky called the Dome of Eternity. Occasionally it rains to simulate the surface. This is to simulate life on the surface to keep morale high. There were times when the dome played ads, but it caused mass panic and suicide, so that was quickly stopped. Now, let's talk factions in the Ark. The normal everyday citizen is given the name of quotidians. I hope I'm saying it right. They are implemented with a free identification chip, and everything in the Ark requires a chip to access. But there is another faction called the Sovereigns. Were they born as nobility or something? No, this is a self-created class where a group of rich people decided to spend ludicrous amounts of money on a customized identification chip, so they can lord it over the, quote, normies, and demand special treatment over it. Of course, this pissed off normies, but what can they do about it? Their opponents were incredibly wealthy. The central government may be against it, but they did eventually give them a location to Ark all their own called the Royal Road. This was where all the sovereigns lived for a while, until they all ended up spreading to different areas around the Ark. The current Royal Road now is a high-end shopping district, and in the current day of the Ark, preferential treatment based on class is considered a crime. There is one last class of people, known as the Outlaws, people without identification chips inside their bodies. But how does this happen? Why would they not have chips? I thought everyone got a free chip. If you commit a crime inside the Ark, you will have your identification chip forcibly removed. Without the chip, you lose access to a majority of things inside the Ark. Without the ability to access things, the Outlaws eventually converge in the area just outside the walls of the Ark called the Outer Rim, shrouded in perpetual darkness where the lights of the Ark doesn't reach. There, a society of crime grew. Once people there started having children, their kids would not have identification chips either, and the population kept growing and growing, and now the estimated amount of outlaws is around 10% of the Ark. Now, the Outer Rim is also home to a faction of terrorists, known as Heavenly Ascension. They fight for the rights of outlaws through extreme means: violence, murder, suicide bombings, anything to get the message across. The central government is obviously not a fan of the Outer Rim for that reason, but for now has chosen not to do anything about it because it has never been that serious. The closest to where the central government had chosen to do anything was when the Heavenly Ascension bombed a hole in the roof of the Ark and lured raptors inside. However, Heavenly Ascension is mostly disbanded now in the current main story. The old leader, Crow, was caught and forced to become a Nikke and work for the central government. The current leader, EH, or Elysian Harper, was killed during the events of the Ark terrorist attack. She then asked to become a Nikke to atone for her sins. So, Heavenly Ascension is all but disbanded at this point, especially with the central government keeping an increasingly stricter eye on the Outer Rim. I keep talking about this mysterious central government. What is this central government anyways? Before the Ark was created, they were originally called the United Forces of Humanity. All nations of the world united under one banner to fight against the Rapture invasion. But when they decided to run to the Ark, they changed their name to the Central Government. They are the main governing body of the Ark and control all information, technology, and resources inside the Ark. They are mostly faceless individuals that we never get to meet, with the exception of Oswald during the events of Red Ash. He was the one who let the Goddess Squad know they are no longer needed and banished them to the surface after the doors of the Ark closed. We are not sure if he's a higher up, but by the way he acts with Red Hood, one can assume he was merely following orders. But for now, we know absolutely nothing about the individuals of the central government. Directly under the central government is the AI Enoch. Although the central government is extremely wary of Enoch, and through meeting with Dorothy and a mass-produced Nikke, we learn they are trying to find ways to solve that issue. Now, Enoch is in charge of almost everything inside the Ark. She can give orders, she can control information, she can pass judgment, all of it under the watchful eye of the central government. Although with more recent events of the Ark, she's shown wanting more control with access to her own private Nikkes. What could go wrong? Here, we see a poster about people complaining about AI and how it took her gerbs, weather management, due process, splendidman production, communication maintenance, urban design, infrastructure, all of those jobs and more. Now, there's a few things on the list we need to talk about. The first is splendidman production. What is splendidman? It's a wonder food. Since humans cannot grow food underground or grow up to the surface to collect food for the entire population of the Ark, they had to mass produce something that can feed the Ark. No one knows how it's made or what it's made from except the central government. It's a highly guarded secret. Now I know people like to say Splendidman is people. Soil and Green references aside, there may be some truth to it. Not exactly, but Ether has hinted at Splendidman not being what it seems. More on Ether and more later. The central government is extremely secretive about information. If we look back on the list, urban design. Okay, now we are going to speculation territory here. Humans did not design the Ark, and the central government is hiding that fact. Early on in the chapters, when we first encounter Indivilia or Material Age, Mana discusses the striking similarities between the Rapture structure and the Ark, as if it was a miniature Ark. How it was like an ant colony, all the chambers fed into the center of the Ark where Indivilia resides, exactly in the shape of the Ark. What is in the center of the Ark then? At that time, we didn't really know much about it, but new information has appeared from the later chapters, and even the most recent events. We will get back to this in a bit. There's too much information I need to talk about first. Back to the list. Another thing people complained about in the Ark was due process. Enoch is in charge of passing judgment. The judges of the Ark will pass cases onto Enoch for judgment. She will then make a decision, and her decisions are swift and efficient. However, there's one flaw in Enoch's judgment, is that She will only pass judgment on her own if there is a threat to the Ark as a whole. Everything else the judges must choose to pass on to her, leading to possible corruption. Another thing, Enoch operates at a different standard from humans. She is an AI. To her, the act of something like human trafficking is considered not a crime. There is no threat to the safety of the Ark, and no one died. So she cannot see the emotional damage dealt to humans. Everything is just numbers to her. So many times it's up to judges to pass judgment themselves. They will designate a target worthy of judgment, declare a vote, and decide. Directly under them are the Perilous Siege, Nikkes without inhibitors, meaning they have the ability to harm humans. They are given a target by the judges, and they will act independently as judge, jury, and executioner. They will see for themselves if the target is guilty or not, then punish them according to their own judgment. And that punishment is usually death. Then, there are the big three, who are working directly under or with the central government. The big three refers to the big three manufacturers of Nikkes, and according to Anise giving us a rundown, we learned the following. Elysian, in charge of military, food, and transportation. Tetra, in charge of entertainment, clothes, necessities. Misalis, everything else. Now she sounds pretty unsure here, but we can all see she's pretty much correct. Not entirely, but close enough. When we first meet Ingrid, the CEO of Elysian, we could see that she was willing to help us. We consider her an ally. But she is probably the closest one to the central government out of the big three. She is constant meeting with the government and the deputy chiefs. She is Intrinsic, a squad which carries out to capture irregular Nikkes. She's in charge of food, which is most likely Splendomen, and the military, which are all closely tied to the central government. Perilous Siege may work for the judges, but all Nikkes have proven to be loyal to their creator, which is Elysian here. Triangle Squad works directly for the central government according to, Anise's colorful words. Central government lapdogs. She knows the existence of Red Hood and is helping the central government cover up information. Not just that, she's shown that she is untrustworthy by destroying evidence of heretic information. Why? Probably because she's hiding something herself. For that, I do not trust her very much. She may have our interests, but how far would that go if it goes against the central government? She has shown to give leniency to Marion, though. Why? We don't know. Now, for Tetra. Mustang is probably the most mysterious of the three. He acts as a fool, but he's clearly not a fool. We know the least about him, and we definitely interacted with him the least in the story. He has shown that he is not a big fan of the government. He goes up against deputy chiefs and the central government's wishes to eradicate the Outer Rim. He's against the use of mind wipes, as he's willing to trade away a lucrative broadcasting station to save his Nikkes. He's all about entertainment, and sometimes even shady business. Dala runs the black market. Cafe Sweetie is often operating inside the Outer Rim. And finally, the Underworld Queens are literal criminal organizations doing business in the Outer Rim. He's not clean, and is probably planning something shady. Now for Misalis, who is in charge of everything else, Suen is probably one of the most hated characters in the game, for a good reason. But we can clearly see what's important to her. Self-interest. She wants money, she wants power. At least we know one character who won't stab us in the back. She'll just be busy doing it from the front instead. I know Anise said Misalis is in charge of everything, but their most impressive accomplishment will most likely be the Rehabilitation Center in the MMR, the Misalis Military Research. The Rehabilitation Center is for Nikkes who committed crimes. Those not far gone that they would get scrapped. There is also the Exotic Squad, who are all criminals from the Outer Rim. They are sent there to keep the place out of trouble for the Ark. Of course, they have bombs strapped to their necks in case of emergency, but they're generally free to do whatever they are in the Outer Rim, as long as the Ark isn't harmed or involved in any way. But MMR is probably one of the biggest contributions to the Ark. They are in charge of research and development. The greatest minds of all the Ark end up there. We don't know how many members of the research team are Nikkes, but there seems to be a handful of them. We know not all of them are Nikkes because Cecil used to work there, and she and a group of individuals left the Ark and created Eden. More on that later. MMR is where the most questionable things in the Ark happens. For example, medical research is used on Nikkes as live test subjects. There they are given viruses and diseases to see how much would be fatal and what the side effects of medication. After a test is done, they are put out of their misery and new ones are sent in. Why? Because Nikkes are cheap. I find it oddly disturbing that they are using Nikkes to test on Nikkes as test subjects. As if the central government are trying to say, if you start growing a conscience, it might be you as a test subject next. Another will be the MMR Vocational School. It may be a school in name only, but it's nothing but a test lab for Nikkes. Here, Nikkes are forced to study and take tests. Those who fail, if they survive the surface of being killed by raptors, will have their memories wiped and given new faces and sent back to study again from the very beginning. If they fail 3 times, they are then sent to MMR to become a lab rat. There they will be used for experimentations until they die. All this for the sake of producing the best Nikke soldiers. All for the advancement of humanity. And it's not just Missiles doing these cruel experiments, but all 3 manufacturers have sent their Nikkes into this school. In the MMR, there's also a recent squad announced in charge of power supply of the Ark. It was never shown or directly told what this power supply was, but it is so terrifying that one of the members, Trani, after learning about it, locked herself inside her room for decades. Even in the current timeline, she still has trauma about the event. So, what is it that's so terrifying? I have some theories. Once again, let's speculate here. If we look at the report on Material H written by Mana, one of the researchers in MMR, it's hinted that whatever made Material H probably made the Ark, as the similarities are so striking. And that the central government and the higher-ups already knew about it and hid the information. We know something is wrong with the power supply because blackouts have been happening all over the Ark. When Rappy enters Red Hood mode, you can hear Red Hood speak. Red Hood keeps repeating the words, "Destroy the Ark." Why? We do get to ask her later for that information while she has forgotten it. We get a glimpse into her fragmented memory. Whatever is in the Ark is terrifying and she forgot. But that looks like a giant rapture core staring back at her. The Ark has never been attacked by raptors since the start of the Rapture War. Why? While Enoch reports making a deal with Chatterbox to not attack the Ark, we need to ask, how does he have the power to uphold his end of the bargain? Or what happens now when the deal is off? This was never brought up again in the main story, so I have a theory. I explained in my Rapture video that Raptors follow a hierarchy and avoid stronger Raptors if they are weaker, with weak Raptors avoiding Marion. My crazy theory is whatever is down there in the center of the Ark is a giant Rapture. You might be thinking, well, when the Raptors entered the Ark during the Ark terrorist attack, how did that happen? Well, Anderson mentioned there were problems with the power supply and there were mass blackouts. Could something have happened that temporarily allowed weaker Raptors to enter? Remember Indivilia at the center of Material H? She has shown she could create rooms out of nothing during our first encounter with her inside the Ark as well. It was so similar to the Ark that no one was able to tell it apart. Could it be maybe a previous queen before she got replaced at the center of the Ark? Could it be a sleeping raptor, kind of like the gatekeeper, and is kept in a dormant state? We know it cannot be a heretic because heretics can detect each other. One thing that Mana mentions is the way Material H absorbs Nikke is similar to the Ark's power supply. So my theory is a giant dying raptor down in the center and is being kept alive by feeding it either humans or Nikkes. And now, after so many years, it is waking up. The power converter being created by the Electric Shock Squad isn't because the power isn't enough, but because the power is, quote, generating far too much power. We see how Nikkes are treated, how they are cheap and disposable. With this line in the event, inside the crimson-colored room, dozens of eyes are trained on Trony. Maybe the humans or Nikkes are not dead while they're being drained of power, and the crimson glow? The light coming off the giant raptured core. Terrifying thoughts indeed, enough to cause trauma. Before we end the video, I do want to point out two other things that aren't part of the arc, but is kind of related to the arc in a way. The first is the outpost, where the commander lives with counters. This is actually up on the surface, and people can visit us from time to time. Other than that, it's just the four of us living up there. The other is Eden. It's a technologically advanced city on the surface, designed and built entirely by one person, Cecil. She is part of MMR before being betrayed and leaving with a group of people. I would assume they were maybe MMR researchers and their families as well. She then created her own Nikkes on the surface, without the nymph, and they are said to be more advanced than the Nikkes of the arc. Where did she get the people for it? I assume the people who follow her ended up becoming Nikkes, as they still remember being betrayed by the arc. Could it be they discovered some deep dark secrets of the arc? We don't know yet. All we do know is there is too many unanswered questions about the arc. Could it be our enemies? Will we turn our back to the arc someday? Could I be absolutely wrong and look like a complete idiot when it's revealed? All possible answers. But let me know what you think about this video. Give it a like if you enjoyed it. Give it a dislike if you don't. Maybe you have your own theory about what is possibly hidden inside the arc. And thank you very much for watching.